Thank you, ladies. Well, on Christmas morning, my wife and I had gluten-free waffles and turkey bacon. And I was a bit skeptical because I don't generally like anything gluten-free. But these were actually quite delicious. And then we went over on the couch and had some gift sharing. One of the gifts that my wife gave me was in this mysterious kind of indigo-colored mesh bag. And I opened it up, and at first glance, it looked like an old biscuit. And I said, okay, Bruce, just go with it, you know. Sometimes people get lumps of coal for Christmas, so. And then on closer inspection, I looked at it, and it was a geode. My wife knows that I love stones and rocks and things like that, so she got me this geode from Morocco. It says it's from Morocco and North Africa. I thought that was pretty exotic. Okay. But it says, break your own geode. Break open this geode to reveal the sparkling crystals inside. I thought, ooh, that's kind of exotic. And I also thought that it was somewhat of a metaphor for our spiritual path. So I thought it might be kind of fun to break open this geode here. Doesn't it look like an old biscuit? I have no idea what it's going to look like inside. No. I'm more awake than that, my dear. Are you ready? It's a harder biscuit than I thought. Ah, the beauty within the geode. Beautiful crystals from Morocco. So I'm just going to leave that right there. When I considered it, I thought, you know, you and I are much like the geode. Sometimes really hard and not so pretty on the outside, but within there is beautiful light reflection and crystals inside of us. But being broken open isn't necessarily our first choice, is it? Especially by some overwhelming outside force. We would perhaps prefer something along the lines of a slow erosion that would open us to what it is that we are. Being broken open sometimes entails a great deal of vulnerability. Can't tell you how many times I've moved along that path of intense vulnerability when feeling broken open. I thought about Charles Fillmore's words. Charles Fillmore is the co-founder of the Unity movement. And he said something along the lines of releasing the imprisoned splendor. That the spiritual path is one of releasing that imprisoned splendor. So this time of year, you and I may have resolutions, or we may have given those up. Probably more importantly is, what are our intentions for the coming year? What are our intentions in terms of allowing ourselves to be opened to seeing with new eyes. So I have a story that I want to share. Two, actually. A 24-year-old man, young man, was seeing out of the train's window, and he shouted, "Dad, look at the trees. They're going behind." His dad smiled, and a young couple sitting nearby looked at the 24-year-old childish behavior with pity, and suddenly he again exclaimed, "Dad, look at the clouds. They're running with us." Excuse me. The couple couldn't resist and said to the father, "Why don't you take your son to a good doctor?" The father smiled and said, "I did, and we are just coming from the hospital. My son was blind from birth. He just got his eyes today." We don't know the story of another's life, do we? We can make assessments based upon our own standards of how people should act, but we have no idea, even with everybody in the room right now, we have no idea of our own story and our own lives. So it's a time of breakthrough. This past week has been interesting. 3 or 4 times, people of unconnected relation have used that word, breakthrough. Breakthrough. And I have sat with that all week. Things like this coming to me, the geode, and different language, different people saying it's a time for breakthrough. The other story that I'd like to share that has to do with a shift. Because when we begin a new year, it is an opportunity for breakthrough and shift. So once there was a time where the daughter complained to her father that her life was miserable and that she didn't know how she was going to make it. She was tired of fighting and struggling. It seemed just as one problem was solved, another soon followed. Her father, a chef, took her to the kitchen, and he filled 3 pots with water and placed each on a high fire. Once the 3 pots began to boil, he placed potatoes in 1 pot, eggs in the second, and ground coffee beans in the third. He then let them sit and boil without saying a word to his daughter. The daughter moaned impatiently and impatiently waited, wondering what he was going to do next. And after 20 minutes, he turned off the burners, and he took the potatoes out of the pot and placed them in a bowl. And then he pulled the boiled eggs out and placed them in a bowl. He then ladled the coffee out and placed it in a cup. Turning to her, he asked, "Daughter, what do you see?" "Potatoes, eggs, and coffee," she hastily replied. "Look closer," he said, and touched the potatoes. She did, and noted that they were soft. He then asked her to take an egg and break it, and after pulling off the shell, she observed the hard-boiled egg. Finally, he asked her to sip the coffee. Its rich aroma brought a smile to her face. "Father, what does this mean?" she asked. He then explained that the potatoes, the eggs, and coffee beans had each faced the same adversity, the boiling water. However, each one reacted differently. The potato went in hard and was unrelenting, but in the boiling water it became soft. The egg was fragile, with a thin outer shell protecting its liquid interior until it was put in the boiling water. And then the inside of the egg became hard However, the ground coffee beans were unique. After they were exposed to the boiling water, they changed the water and created something new. "Which are you?" he asked his daughter. "When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you a potato, an egg, or a coffee bean?" The moral for this story is that things happen around us. Things happen to us. But the only thing that truly matters is what happens within us. Similar to the story of the geode, we can become hard on the outside. But all the while, there is this great gift, this shining, glistening, crystalline self that is our essence. And that much of this process called spiritual growth is about remembering that great truth. One of the most important things in this life is our emotional life, is it not? How do we handle our emotional lives? What a plethora of emotion was evident all during December and even up until this very moment. There's tremendous things that you and I are engaged in terms of our giving and our receiving and our helping and our ability to receive help from other people. So we have to ask ourselves whether or not we're willing to be broken open. What's the risk? Will I be too vulnerable? Is it safe? I came across a quote by a Mr. Charlie Chaplin. When we think of Charlie Chaplin, we usually think of the little tramp that we never really hear from him because he was engaged in silent movies back in the late teens 100 years ago and in the early 20s before there were talkies. But he was a very wise man. He said, "To truly laugh, you must be able to take your pain and play with it." To take your pain and play with it. So sometimes it's important to soften the heat of life, to be softened. And sometimes it's important to gain a resolve, a more firmness within ourselves as we are exposed to the heat in life. Will we be hardened this year? Will we be softened? Or will we allow our essence to flow throughout the emotional life that is around us to bless other people? One thing I'm really sure of, that we must be malleable. In the Sermon on the Mount, which is the only formal talk that Jesus ever gave, according to what we know anyway. He said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." I've always had a little bit of trouble with that until I had a little bit more understanding, because I always thought meek was equated with weak. But meek, translated, means teachable, malleable, allowing life to teach us, allowing ourselves to be broken open, allowing ourselves to let go of that which is not true, to release that which is not so that the fine, beautiful crystals within ourselves, the shiny aliveness can come forth. The essence of what it is to me, it means to be alive, to bless other people. And the words to enter into the kingdom of heaven. A lot of times we think that that is an after-death state, but it's really not. The kingdom of heaven, it is said within the teachings, is within us. So how do we allow that to happen? Through becoming, as the teachings also say, like a small child, which is to become teachable, malleable, open, and receptive. To see with new eyes, just as our 24-year-old young man received new eyes. So it's our choice to become like an old biscuit in life, or a geode that is always hiding its essence until it's broken open. But we need to remember that the intention of life, and I stand on this as an absolute truth, that the intention of life is to break us open, to allow the imprisoned splendor to come forth. We are not created and walking on the earth so that we become hardened and unavailable to allowing the inspiration to move through us. We are meant, as I said before, on the hero's journey, we are meant to shine, to allow our light to shine. So a question could be asked, what am I to learn through this life experience if I'm broken open, if I'm going through some really difficult stuff? It's not to be a victim, but it's to learn. What are we learning as we move through this experience? The Sermon on the Mount, I believe there's 7 or 8 or 9 Beatitudes, they're called. I like to call them beauty attitudes. Beauty attitudes, to allow the inner beauty through a right attitude of life to express through us. To be meek, not weak, but teachable. To allow ourselves to be broken open. And to trust that what it is that is within us is so much more beautiful than what we're allowing ourselves to express. That's the opportunity for a new year, for 2019. What's your intention for 2019? Maybe it's just to be present, to be in the moment. And that seems to be a divine solution in a way. To be present in the moment and allow that which is the truth of being to express through us. Maybe or maybe not to have a lot of goals in the outer sense, but in a way to accept and allow our own beautiful crystalline structure to be expressed. I mean, how long has that been in development underneath the surface of the hard exterior? And only today, after being in some cave in Morocco, only today, broken open for us to see its beauty. If there's no accidents, and I believe that there are no accidents, not an atom out of place, it was by divine appointment that my wife was in a store, she saw this, she gave it to me, and now I'm sharing it with you as an example of the beauty that is within each one of us, that is just right there to be broken open. Happy New Year. God bless.